Number 6. When Bristol, still better known in the early 1950s for building aircraft than cars, unveiled the 404 in 1953, it looked as if the aviation engineers had finally been let loose on a road-going toy. And the result was a short, sharp businessman's express, unlike anything else on British roads. Underneath, the 404 still used Bristol's familiar chassis, but shortened by about 40 centimeters to create a compact, close-coupled coupe that was more sporting than the dignified 400-403 saloons that came before it. The body was aluminium over a traditional ash frame, but the styling stepped away from the pre-war BMW look. Out went the twin-kidney grille. In came an enormous aero-style nose, said to be inspired by the air intake of Bristol's Type 167 Brabazon airliner, plus a fastback tail and neat finned rear wings. Power came from Bristol's 2-liter straight-six, itself descended from the pre-war BMW 328 design, tuned in the 404 to around 105 to 125 horsepower, depending on specification. Enough for a genuine 120 miles per hour in an era when many family cars struggled to reach 70. That blend of speed and refinement led Bristol and the press to describe it as a fast cross-country GT for discreet, well-heeled owners, and it was marketed with the wonderfully pompous nickname, the Businessman's Express. Number 5. In the early 1950s, Ferrari was still mostly a racing constructor that happened to sell a few road cars to fund the next season. And the 250 Europa GT is the moment when that balance quietly began to shift. Introduced at the 1954 Paris Salon as the immediate successor to the 250 Europa, it at first even carried the same name until the GT suffix was added to distinguish this new, more purposeful Grand Tourer. At a glance, the Europa GT looked almost identical to the Pininfarina-styled 250 Europa 3-window coupe, with the same elegant, understated lines and egg crate grille. You'd need a tape measure to spot that the wheelbase had been shortened by about 200 millimeters, the biggest visual clue being the shorter distance between the front wheel arch and the A-pillar. Under the skin, however, it was a very different animal. Ferrari abandoned the long block Lampredi V12 of the Europa and fitted a compact Colombo short block 3-liter V12 derived from the 250mm race car, tuned for about 220 horsepower, enough for around 135 miles per hour, but with a smoother, more civilized character, suited to fast continental touring rather than all-out competition. Although built in very small numbers, it's widely regarded as Ferrari's first true series-built GT and the foundation of the entire 250 GT road car family that followed. Number 4. Unveiled first as a bare chassis at the 1955 Paris Salon, and then as a complete Pininfarina coupe at Brussels in early 1956, it replaced the 375 America as Maranello's top-of-the-line Grand Tourer, the absolute summit of the Ferrari road car catalog. The basic recipe was simple, but outrageous for its day. Stretch a special tubular chassis, clothe it in elegant, almost restrained Pininfarina bodywork closely related to the new 250 GT Coupe, and then slide in Ferrari's biggest Lampredi V12, a 4.9-liter unit descended from the engine that had just won Le Mans in the 375 Plus. In road tune, it produced around 340 horsepower and, in later form, up to about 400, giving the car a top speed in the region of over 160 miles per hour, astonishing for a leather-lined GT in the 1950s. Ferrari built the 410 Superamerica in 3 tiny series between 1956 and 1959, each refining the chassis and engine, so that early long-wheelbase cars, shorter and more agile Series 2 coupes, and the final, sharper-looking Series 3 all share the same basic character. Huge, effortless speed with the sort of hand-built cabin where every switch and stitch could be tailored to its owner. In total, only roughly 3 dozen 410 Superamericas were made, so it was rare even when new, with a 1959 list price of about $16,795 in the US, more than the average American house at the time. Number 3. Launched as part of the A6G54 series that debuted at the 1954 Paris Motor Show, it was the road-going 2000 GT version of the A6GCS sports racing car, with the factory code A6G54 used internally, while brochures simply called it Maserati 2000 Gran Turismo. Maserati didn't build its own bodies at the time, so it sent bare chassis to coach builders. Pininfarina was now closely tied to Ferrari, so this new GT line went instead to Frua, Zagato, and, for the most refined three-box coupes, Carrozzeria Alemanno in Turin. Designed by Giovanni Michelotti, the Alemanno cars were formal but understated 2+2 coupes. Long bonnet, clean roofline, delicate chrome, and just enough visual muscle to hint at what was under the hood. Under that elegant skin sat a 2-liter all-alloy straight-six with double overhead cams and 3 Weber carburetors, derived from Maserati's racing engines and tuned to roughly 150 to 160 horsepower, enough for about 130 miles per hour in period tests. Over the whole A6G54 run from 1954 to 1957, only about 60 cars were made, and just 21 of those were Alemanno coupes, officially catalogued as Tipo C, each one hand-finished and slightly different in details, from trim to interior layout. Number 2. When Ferrari unveiled the 375 America at the Paris Salon in October 1953, it was essentially sending a message to the world's richest car enthusiasts. This is the top of the tree. It took the elegant, long-wheelbase chassis of the 250 Europa, a huge 2,800mm platform, the longest Ferrari had used up to that point, and paired it with a mighty 4.5-liter big-block V12 designed by Aurelio Lampredi, a road-tuned cousin of the engine that had just been winning major endurance races. Pininfarina shaped most of the bodies, refining the earlier 212 Inter-Europa look into a low, formal two-door coupe that managed to be both understated and obviously expensive, while Vignale was allowed to go wilder with a handful of more flamboyant coupes and at least one spectacular cabriolet. Ferrari's own records talk about 10 chassis built as 375 Americas, with 2 250 Europas later upgraded at the factory with the big 4.5-liter engine. So, depending on how you count, there are roughly a dozen true 375 Americas in the world, the kind of car where it's easier to list the owners than the production numbers. The very last car built was a special Pininfarina coupe for Gianni Agnelli, the head of Fiat, featuring a dramatic wraparound windscreen, vertical grille, and flying buttresses down the rear pillars, more rolling sculpture than mere transport, and was shown to the public at the 1954 Turin Salon. Number 1. In the early 1950s, Ferrari was discovering that not every wealthy customer wanted a barely tamed racing car. Some wanted the same exotic V12 magic, but in something you could cross a continent in without arriving exhausted. The Ferrari 342 America, introduced in late 1952, was Maranello's answer to that brief, a refined, 4-seat Grand Tourer that quietly softened the wild edges of the 340 America while keeping its aura of exclusivity. Built around Aurelio Lampredi's large V12, now in 4.1-liter form and tuned to roughly 200 horsepower, it offered strong, flexible torque and a new fully synchronized 4-speed gearbox, making the car far easier to drive smoothly than many of Ferrari's earlier road machines. To turn this into a proper long-distance GT, Ferrari stretched the wheelbase to 2,650 millimeters and widened the track compared with the 340, creating more cabin space for 4 passengers and their luggage, exactly what its name promised to American and European clients who dreamed of high-speed touring. As was typical of the era, Ferrari supplied rolling chassis to Italy's elite coach builders rather than building bodies in-house. One chassis went to Vignale for a glamorous cabriolet, the others to Pininfarina for a mix of elegant coupés and cabriolets, each subtly different in roofline, trim, and interior, but sharing that long bonnet, formal tail silhouette that became a hallmark of Ferrari's early luxury cars. Production was over almost as soon as it began. Just 6 cars in total, built between 1952 and 1953.